we had a guest speaker at the church in Atlanta by the name of Steve Saint. Traveling around the country, and somehow through people in the church, he made the connection, and he spoke on a Saturday and a Sunday, both, and a Sunday night. One of the most powerful speakers I've ever heard. You may say, well, who in the world was Steve Saint? Steve Saint was the son of one of the 7 missionaries who were murdered by the Auca Indians in Ecuador in the 1950s. Life magazine did a big spread that maybe some of you remember. I have a copy of that in my office. Elizabeth Elliot and her husband were probably the most famous of the couples, the missionary couples. But Steve Saint was the son of Nate Saint. Now get this, Steve Saint was baptized into Christ by one of the men that murdered his father. Now think about that. That's hard to process in my brain. Steve Saint was baptized when he became of age by one of the men who had years earlier, 5 to 10 years earlier, had murdered his father. You may remember how they landed their small airplane on a river bank in Ecuador. The 7 missionaries got out of this small aircraft just to minister to a group of people, and they were speared to death. There was just no conversation. It was just over. And all they were trying to do was to reach out in love to these people. And yet, Steve Saint would talk about how he loved those people. I'm thinking, those people killed your dad. Those people murdered your father, but because of the missionaries' effort and the wives stayed on, the very people that killed the missionaries were led to Jesus Christ. And one of the men who was responsible for the death of his father was the man who stood over a 12 or 13-year-old boy and said, I now baptize you into Christ in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. How do you explain that? The only way I can explain it is not logically, not intellectually. I can only explain that spiritually. The love of God is able to do things in your life and in the lives of other people that nothing else can do, that psychology cannot do, that medicine cannot do, that intelligence or education cannot do. The love of God transcends everything. Remember that. The love of God transcends every power in your life, every dynamic in your life that's going on. It's far greater than you would ever dream or imagine. And so when Jesus says today, but I tell you, you have to make a decision. Every man, every woman in this room has to make this choice. Either I decide to love or I decide to hate. Remember that choosing to hate is a choice to die. Choosing to hate is choosing death. Choosing love is choosing life. Make the decision, the choice today.